Trigonometry for Beginners. Did you know you're like 10 minutes away from finally understanding trigonometry? It's true. Okay, before we get started, I need you to go into the description and download the files and print them off, okay? So we can work through these together. Also, have your calculator ready and make sure your calculator's set on degrees. And don't forget to subscribe. Okay, let's get started right now. Trigonometry for Beginners. Does trigonometry confuse you? Well, let's get rid of that confusion. Some of the problems that we run into when people are trying to explain trigonometry is they'll take 3 or 4 different ways of getting there. Could you imagine trying to get to a store and then every time someone shows you how to get to that store, they tell you a different way to get there? So I'm going to take a different approach and I'm going to show you how to get to the store the exact same way every time. So bear with me. Before we start, please go into the description below and download the file and have your calculator ready so you can go along with me while I'm doing these 9 questions. By the way, there's really only 9 trigonometry questions to solve all of your basic trigonometry problems. Okay, let's get started. Before we start, and I shouldn't say before because we're starting right now, we want to talk about the triangle. Okay, so if my angle's right here, the length or side that's closest to it is going to be the adjacent side. If the angle's here, the one that's furthest away is going to be the opposite side. And the part of your triangle that's the longest is going to be called the hypotenuse. So, bear with me, we're going to test this theory out. If this is my angle up top here, this guy here is going to be my opposite, my adjacent, and the hypotenuse, it always stays the same. Okay, let's take a look at our chart here. We have sine, cosine, tangent, cotangent, secant, and cosecant. If we take a look, some of these have relationships. Okay, so our opposite and hypotenuse for our sine, and our cosecant, hypotenuse and opposite, is just the inverse of sine. So when we type on our calculator, we're not going to find a cosecant button. What we'll find is a sine button. Same with cos and secant. They're just inverted. And the same with tan and cotangent. Okay, problem number 1. What we have is we have one side here that's 5 inches. And what we want to know is x. We also have a 30-degree angle. So if our angle's here, this length here is called the opposite side. The longest part of the triangle is called the hypotenuse. So what we have is a question. When we solve our questions, we want to solve for what's on top. So we're going to put our opposite on top over our hypotenuse. So if we look, opposite over hypotenuse is going to be sine. Then we turn around and we say, okay, let's get out our calculator. Follow along with me. We're going to type in sine. Then we're going to type in 30 times 5 equals 2.5. So therefore, x equals 2.5 inches. So the opposite side is 2.5 inches long. Okay, problem number 2. So now what we have is we still have our length here, our largest side, which is called the hypotenuse. You're right. Now this one here, because the angle is right here, what's this guy called? This is the adjacent. So what we want to find, we're going to put on top. So it's going to be adjacent over hypotenuse. So adjacent over hypotenuse is cosine. Okay, we pull out our calculator again. We're going to type in cos 30 times 5 equals 4.3301. Therefore, x equals 4.331. Problem number 3. We have our 30-degree angle. We have one length and we have a second length. So what we want to find here is the opposite side, and what we have is the adjacent side. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the one we want to find on top, same as we did with all the other ones and all the ones we're going to do. So our opposite goes on top of our adjacent. Opposite over adjacent. So we're going to be using tan. Tan 30 times 5 equals 2.8868. That's not so difficult now, is it? Problem number 4. We're still solving for x. Now this problem seems very familiar because we just did one that looks very familiar to this. On our last problem, we were solving for the opposite and we had the adjacent. Now this time we have the opposite and we're trying to find the adjacent. Okay, so what we want to find, we want to put on top. So we're going to say adjacent over opposite. Adjacent over opposite. Do we remember the relationship that we had between tan and cotangent? Cotangent is just inverse of the tangent. So how do we type this into our calculator? We're going to type in tan 30 equals second function 1 over. So that's going to inverse the tan. Equals times 5 equals 8.6602. So therefore, the adjacent length here is 8.662 or 02. Problem number 5. So what we have is we have the 5 inches here, but we want to find out what x is. So therefore, we don't know this length. Here's our angle. So what we want to find, we're going to put on top. So we're going to put hypotenuse over adjacent. Let's go to our chart here. Hypotenuse over adjacent is going to be secant. If we remember our relationships, cosine and secant have a relationship to each other. Secant is the inverse of cosine. Okay, so we're going to type in cos 30 equals second function 1 over, so we're going to inverse that amount now, times 5 equals 5.774. Therefore, the hypotenuse is 5.774. Now, let's take a break for a second here. Sometimes your calculator lies to you. We can agree with that. Sometimes it does. What if I accidentally pressed a button that I wasn't supposed to press, or I made a mistake typing a button in? One of the ways that you can instantly tell that your answer is incorrect, if this length here is less than this length. If this was 4.77 and this length here is 5, you know there's a mistake right away. Because the hypotenuse is the longest side, so it has to be larger. So if you're getting a smaller number, don't trust your calculator. Start over, redo it again. Problem number 6. Okay, so what we have here is we have the opposite length, and we want to find our hypotenuse. Okay, let's go to our chart. So we're going to say hypotenuse over opposite. Hypotenuse over opposite. Okay. Cosecant, which is the inverse of sine. Okay. Sine 30 equals second function 1 over equals times 5 equals 10. Problem number 7. Okay, here's a tricky one. I have the length of my opposite, I have the length of my hypotenuse, but wait a second, I don't have an angle. Okay, so we know that we're going to be using opposite and hypotenuse. In this one, when we solve, we're going to be using the upper 3 of our chart here. When we're just going to be finding angles, we only want to find using these 3. We don't want to use these ones because we don't want the inverse. Okay, so we're going to use opposite over hypotenuse. So we're going to go second function, sine. And you're going to type your bracket in, 3 divided by 5, bracket equals, and then you're going to come up with 36.869765. Second function, DMS, 36, 52 minutes and 12 seconds. Now, if this was a metric question, it would stay as a decimal. Okay, let's try another one. Problem number 8. Okay, so we have the hypotenuse and we have the adjacent, but we don't have our angle. So hypotenuse, adjacent, hypotenuse. We know that this is going to be cosine. Okay, so we're going to go second function, cos, bracket 3 divided by 5, bracket equals 53.1301. So we're going to second function this, DMS, degrees, minutes, seconds, and it comes out with 53 degrees, 7 minutes, and 48 seconds. Problem number 9, the last problem. Okay, so what we have here is we have the opposite and we have the adjacent. We want to find our angle. So opposite, adjacent. We go to our chart here, opposite, adjacent. So we're going to be using tan. Second function, tan, bracket 4 divided by 5, bracket equals 38 degrees, 0.65. Second function, DMS, 38 degrees, 39 minutes, and 35 seconds. Don't forget to subscribe. I hope that this video has given you a broader understanding of trigonometry. Keep in mind there's only 9 possible solutions to most trigonometry questions. There's also a lot more trigonometry questions and answers on my YouTube channel, Shop and Math. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. It's free and it'll help me out. All you have to do is click on the icon of my face and I'll do the rest.